Good morning, CAP member schools. Happy Catholic Schools Week. Welcome to the 2021 GG National Conference. To give us the opening remarks, we call on our president, Sister Maria Marisa Viri RVM. A virtual round of applause for Sister Marisa.
Good morning, everyone. I welcome you to celebrate the CAP Catholic Schools Week and the 2021 GIPG National Conference. Thank you for choosing to celebrate with us today. We also thank Father Iking Balongag, our Vice President and Chairperson of the Programs Committee, for presiding over our Eucharistic celebration today. In January 2012, the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines released a pastoral letter to commemorate 400 years of Catholic education in the Philippines. The letter reminded us of our God-given mission as educators to go and make disciples of all nations. It also traced the beginnings of Catholic education in our country, and it lauded Catholic schools' contributions not only to the evangelizing mission of the Church, but also to the advancement and renewal of society. This is what we continue to celebrate during the Catholic Schools Week, that despite the many present-day challenges of decreasing enrollment, student and teacher migration to public schools, compounded by the devastating effects brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic, Catholic schools remain faithful to the real aim of education is stated in Gravissimum Educationes, the formation of the human heart in the pursuit of its ultimate end and the good of the societies. We celebrate the Catholic schools' dedication to transformative education. In his message during the Global Compact for Catholic Education in October 2020, Pope Francis said that given the global crisis that we are facing today, there is need for a renewed commitment to an education that engages society at every level. He asked that we heed the plea of the young, which open our eyes to both the urgent need and the exciting opportunity of a renewed kind of education that is not tempted to look the other way and thus favor grave social injustices, violations of rights, terrible forms of poverty, and the waste of human lives. In CAP, we have our pillar programs on justice and peace, ecological integrity, engaged citizenship, poverty reduction, gender equality, and youth empowerment, or the GIPG as our brand of transformative education that engages society at all levels. Through the various programs and advocacies, GIPG-related issues and concerns are examined in the light of faith, and responses are anchored on the teachings and example of Christ. That is why, during the celebration of Catholic Schools Week, we found it fitting to organize the GIPG National Conference. We want to underscore the school's prophetic role in announcing the good news in a world that is beset by poverty, suffering, injustice, violence, and indifference, so that in a society that is in constant need of renewal, we forge on in our mission of being catalysts of change in the different dimensions of human life, always bearing in mind that the end goal of Catholic education is being conformed to Jesus, the great teacher. Have a blessed Catholic Schools Week. May we always see the face of Christ in our students and each other. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you, Sister Marisa. We now listen to the overview of our conference to be given by our Executive Director, Mr. Jose Alan Arellano. Another virtual round of applause for Mr. Arellano.
Mabuhay at magandang araw sa lahat. Salamat, Sister Marisa, for your message. Father Iking for presiding over our Eucharistic celebration, and Mary Ann for organizing all these events. Happy Catholic Schools Week to all our CAP member schools, administrators, faculty, staff, and students. As we celebrate Catholic Schools Week, we cannot think of Catholic education without thinking of education for social transformation. In the midst of a society plagued by corruption, violence, social injustice, environmental degradation, poverty, breakdown of family values, and even irrational government red tagging of social workers and educators, among others, Catholic schools must continue to raise their prophetic voice, combat these ills, and share in the evangelizing mission of the Church. In CAP, GIPG is our platform for engagement. The CAP mission of advancing inclusive and transformative Catholic education in communion and service for the poor and marginalized provides the frame of CAP's GIPG pillar programs. This is consistent with the 6 defining characteristic of the Philippine Catholic School Standards, or PCSS, which states that an excellent Catholic school is committed to integral human formation. Integral human formation fosters education for justice and peace, care for creation, engaged citizenship, gender sensitivity, and responsible use of all forms of media, among others. And the 7th defining characteristic, which is an excellent Catholic school, is engaged in the service of the Church and society with preferential option for the poor. This is the 3rd National GIPG Conference that the Programs Committee has organized since 2018. We had to cancel our planned GIPG Conference last year because of the pandemic. But this year, the GIPG Conference serves as a build-up activity for the launch of the year-long celebration of our 80th founding anniversary next Tuesday, February 2, 2021. We are celebrating SEAP's 80 years of commitment to transformative education. Guided by the PCSS Benchmark 3.1, that concretely encourages the school community to actively collaborate with the local church in addressing local, regional, national, and global issues to promote justice and peace, care for creation, love for our country's gender sensitivity, and responsible use of all forms of media, among others. And Benchmark 8.3 that states that the curriculum in different learning areas shall engage learners to discern and integrate relevant gospel values, especially in the concerns for justice and peace, care for creation, love for one's country, gender sensitivity, and responsible use of all forms of media. This GIPG conference will provide a space for open dialogue and reflection on critical issues confronting Philippine society and the world at large, situating the role of SEAP member schools in this time of the pandemic, and how, as members of the Catholic community, we can help alleviate, if not eradicate, the ills that overtake the goodness and humanity, and provide hope during these trying times. In the next 6 days, we hope that the webinars will be able to provide a venue for GIPG-related issues and concerns are discussed and addressed. We also wish to provide content updating on and share best practices in the various GIPG advocacies. To give you a sneak preview of the GIPG conference today, Today's Ecological Integrity webinar will be featuring a session on how to address climate change and how the education sector can contribute to this endeavor. Tomorrow, our webinar on justice and peace will showcase local and international speakers who will share nonviolence and just peace as a way of life, following from the life and teaching of Christ. On Wednesday, for our webinar on poverty reduction, we have invited sharers from the Negros Island to share their best practices in organizing programs for the poor. A highlight of the GPG conference is an offering by the National Christian Formation Commission of a webinar on the use of creative strategies in facilitating an online recollection. The first part will feature an actual recollection demonstrating the use of these creative strategies. The second part will be a discussion on the said strategies. This will be on Thursday, the Feast of St. Thomas Aquinas. Then on Friday, we will tackle how to form and engage citizenry, not only for the coming 2022 elections, but also for nation building. For Monday next week, our webinar on gender equality hopes to end gender-based violence through care, respect, and empowerment. 80 years ago in 1941, Archbishop O'Doherty, the longest-serving prelate of the Archdiocese of Manila, discerned and realized the potential of a community of schools journeying together in communio and service. Today, we're a big community. We are 1,500 schools with hundreds of thousands of students and millions of other stakeholders, including parents and graduates of our schools. May our common desire for transformative education bring our nation to a better future. Now, to be with us, you may add our CAF at SEA frame to your Facebook profile picture. Click your profile picture and select Add Frame. Search the frame by entering the keyword SEA at 80. I'm sure you're all excited to listen to our first webinar, so I will not keep you waiting. But before I end, allow me to thank our wonderful partners, the Private Education Assistance Committee or PAC and Roxo City. We thank PAC for the usual kind support to our programs for transformative education and Roxo for being our reliable web host. May we all have a meaningful Catholic School Week celebration during this GPG conference. Maraming salamat at magandang araw muli sa inyo.
Maraming salamat, Mr. Arellano, for giving us the overview of the conference using the framework of the Philippine Catholic School Standards. We now proceed to our first webinar for this conference, and we call on our moderator for today, the chairperson of the CEAP Subcommittee on Ecological Integrity, Dr. Carlo Garcia. Take it away, Carlo.
Thank you, Miss Marianne, and it's a privilege and an honor to serve as moderator for today's webinar. A blessed morning to all the administrators, faculty, and personnel of the CEAP member schools all over the Philippines. Welcome to the first day of our 2021 CEAP National GIPG Conference. Today's webinar, focusing on ecological integrity, is entitled Let's Vote In for Climate Neutrality. We are live both on the CAP Facebook page and the CAP YouTube channel, and we will continue to deliver our webinars on these two platforms. If you have not done this yet, we ask you to like this webinar by pressing the thumbs up button below and subscribe to our CAP YouTube channel now. Also, don't forget to share and hit the notification bell so that you will be informed of all the coming CAP webinars. Again, like, subscribe, share, and hit the notification bell. Now, for some reminders. First, while the talk is ongoing, we encourage you to post your questions or comments at the comments section on Facebook and YouTube. We will ask these questions or read these comments during the Q&A portion. Second, we get a lot of queries about certificates. Please be informed that you will receive the certificate of attendance only upon completion of the evaluation form. The link has already been posted as part of the caption of this video, both on Facebook and YouTube. But please note that the link will only go live only from 11:30 a.m. until 5 p.m. today. Let me repeat, 11:30 a.m. until 5 p.m. today. So if you click it now, it's not going to open. We encourage you to answer the evaluation form and you will receive your certificate of attendance within 3 to 5 days. Finally, please be reminded as well that this is a free webinar brought to you in partnership with the Private Education Assistance Committee, or PEAC. Again, we are giving this to you for free. But if you want to pay it forward, listen to this. You may donate to our Kapatirang Kamagong Fund. It is our fund for helping the poor and struggling CAP mission schools because we heal as one. Lastly, we encourage you to share this webinar to your networks with the hashtag CEAP Cares and hashtag I love Catholic Ed. Let me now introduce our session. Pope Francis has declared a global climate emergency. He warned us of the dangers of global heating and that a failure to act urgently to reduce greenhouse gases would be a brutal act of injustice towards the poor and future generations. He also endorsed the 1.5 degrees Celsius limit on temperature that some countries are now aiming for, referring to warnings from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change of the catastrophic effects if we cross such a threshold. Pope Francis said that a radical energy transition would be needed to stay within that limit and urge young people and businesses to take a leading role. He said, future generations stand to inherit a greatly spoiled world. Our children and grandchildren should not have to pay the cost of our generation's irresponsibility. And this has been his strongest and most direct intervention yet on the climate crisis. Indeed, as is becoming increasingly clear, young people are calling for a change. Hence, this webinar seeks to provide the teachers with an overview of what to highlight in teaching climate change to students, its causes and effects. Share examples of good practices related to climate neutrality in some schools. Motivate and inspire school administrators to come up with policies and programs that can contribute to achieving climate neutrality. And finally, enjoin the CAP schools to join the effort to make a quantum leap to improve the Philippine environment. Let me now introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is a teacher, textbook writer, trainer, and of course, an environmental advocate. She has been with Miriam College for 30 years, where she served in various capacities as administrator and where she finished her PhD in environmental studies. She is currently the Associate Director of Miriam College Environmental Studies Institute. She also currently serves as board member of the Kaliwa Watershed and the Upper Marikina River Basin Protected Area Management Board. Friends, let's give a virtual round of applause to Dr. Louis Parungao.
Good morning, fellow educators for the integrity of creation. Climate change is one of the greatest environmental problems that humanity has ever faced, for it threatens our very own survival. Pope Francis, in his encyclical on the environment entitled Laudato Si', stated that climate change is one great challenge that humanity of today has to deal with. What is climate change? Why are we experiencing climate change? And why do we need to vote in for climate neutrality? These are the questions that we will discuss this morning. My task is to discuss the answers to the first two questions. But just a disclaimer before we start. I am not a climate scientist, but a passionate environmental educator. What I'm going to share with you today are based on my review of literature on climate change using the 7 environmental principles as framework. The world is burning. This is the idea that the images in the net suggests when you search about climate change. Is the world really burning? Well, maybe not literally, but the heat that we feel during summer is comparable to the heat coming from embers or burning coal. A common expression to describe how hot a room is during summer is that it's like in an oven, or in Filipino, parang nasa pugon. Science-based evidences show that global temperature is continuously rising. Temperature data from 5 international science institutions all show that rapid warming in the past few decades and that the last decade has been the warmest on record, as shown in the graph. 19 of the 20 warmest years all have occurred since 2001, and the year 2016 ranks the warmest on record, followed by 2017, 2019, and most recently, 2020. There are compelling evidences to prove that the world is really warming. According to IPCC Fifth Assessment Report in 2013, the warming of the climate system is unequivocal or undisputable. And since the 1950s, many of the observed changes are unprecedented over decades to millennia. The U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has determined 10 indicators that the world is warming, and these are rising air temperature, or rising rather, air temperature over ocean, rising sea surface temperature, increasing ocean heat content, diminishing Arctic sea ice extent, global sea level rise, increasing humidity, rising temperature of the lower atmosphere, rising air temperature over land, decreasing snow cover, and declining glaciers and ice sheets. And all this lead to changes in the climate pattern. Global warming and climate change are used interchangeably or synonymously. But just to differentiate, global warming refers to the rising global temperature due to the increasing concentration of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, while climate change refers to the seasonal changes over a long period of time, which is an effect of global warming. So we can say that global warming is the cause and climate change is the result. Based on the definition of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, It is a change in climate pattern attributed directly or indirectly to human activity that alters the composition of the global atmosphere and which is in addition to natural variability observed over comparable time periods. Climate variability refers to the changes that occur within smaller time frames such as month, a season, or a year. The cause can be external or internal to the climate system. Climate change, on the other hand, are changes in climate pattern over a longer period of time, over decades. The classical period is over 30 years. To have a better appreciation of what climate change is, we have to know the different components and to understand the processes involved in the climate system. Powered by solar radiation or energy, the climate system is a complex, interactive system consisting of the atmosphere, hydrosphere, cryosphere, geosphere, and biosphere, where the main processes of the system occur. In the atmosphere, it's a thin layer of mixed gases that covers the Earth and prevents it from becoming too hot or cold. Air takes on some characteristics on the surface beneath it, the atmosphere's circulation, the heat and light passing through it, and the processes that occur in it, such as rainfall. In the geosphere or land surface, different types of grounds and plants absorb varying amounts of solar energy, resulting in differing rates of evaporation and heating. The shape or topography of the land also affects wind, allowing slowing it down or channeling it in certain directions, all affecting the climate. Hydrosphere are the oceans, rivers, lakes, and groundwater. The oceans are the largest component of the global climate system and influence climate by absorbing and emitting heat. Ocean currents transport large amounts of heat and water around the world. Evaporation from the oceans is a major source of water vapor in the atmosphere. The hydrosphere interacts with the land surface and atmosphere by supplying groundwater to plant roots, allowing transpiration. The cryosphere is the ice that covers the parts of the world, mainly sea ice in the Arctic, Southern Oceans, and the land-based ice sheets on Greenland and Antarctica. It also includes ice and snow in many high-altitude regions across the globe, such as the snowy mountains, the Himalayas, and on frozen land, or what we call the permafrost. Finally, the biosphere is the collective word for the parts of the earth, including air, land, surface, rocks, and water, where life is found. Humans are part of the biosphere, as are cities, farms, and oceans. The biosphere plays a major role in the carbon cycle and determining the atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide. Okay, let's try to look deeper into each of the components. The Earth is the only planet in the solar system known to have an atmosphere that can sustain life. The atmosphere is composed of 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, 0.04% carbon dioxide, and 96% mostly 0.96% mostly argon. At 93% and 0.3% are the other trace gases such as helium, neon, methane, krypton, hydrogen, and water vapor. Carbon, methane, nitrous oxides, ozone, and water vapor prevent heat from escaping back to space, creating a greenhouse effect. What is the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect is the term scientists use to describe the way that greenhouse gases trap the sun's energy. As shown in this graphic, rays of the sun enters the Earth's atmosphere and passes through a layer of greenhouse gases. Clouds and aerosols reflect about one-third of these rays back to space and by the Earth or in the atmosphere. The rest is absorbed by the Earth's surface, by the land, oceans, and other bodies of water, including the plants and other structures therein, and the small part by the atmosphere. Absorbed radiation heats up the Earth's surface and is emitted back to the atmosphere as infrared radiation. When you say infrared radiation, it's like the heat coming from a fire. Some of this infrared radiation from the Earth's surface would escape back to space, but some is trapped and is bounced back to the Earth by the greenhouse gases, keeping the Earth warm at night time. Without the greenhouse effect, the Earth will freeze at night time. The more greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, the more heat is trapped, the warmer is on the Earth. There are processes in nature that regulate itself, one of which is the process of photosynthesis. During photosynthesis, plants, phytoplanktons, and other photosynthetic organisms absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and give off oxygen and moisture as byproducts. As such, the amount of heat-absorbing gases in the atmosphere is regulated so that just the right amount of heat is trapped on the Earth's surface. Forests, therefore, play an important role in climate regulation. Forests not only serve as carbon sink, absorbing great amount of carbon dioxide for photosynthesis and storing carbon in their biomass. Forests also contribute greatly to cloud formation through the process of evapotranspiration, in which trees release water vapor into the atmosphere, contributing to the cloud formation. Forest canopy also help reflect radiation and have evaporative cooling effect, hence contributing to heat reduction. In the same manner, phytoplankton or microscopic plants that thrive in the oceans help regulate climate. Phytoplanktons absorb and convert great amount of carbon dioxide into carbohydrates or reduced carbon through the process of photosynthesis. Some of the absorbed carbon sink and stay buried in sediments of the ocean floor for maybe millions of years. The hydrosphere. The ocean, which covers 70% of the Earth's surface, has a significant role in climate regulation. The interplay of both physical and biological processes in the oceans create a complex system that influences the global climate. Most of the heat or radiation from the sun is absorbed by the ocean, particularly those in the equatorial region. Because water has a property to absorb more and retain heat longer than land and air, it cools down slower than the land. So that warm ocean water provides the heat that keep the earth warm at night. As warm ocean water continuously evaporates the surrounding air gets hot and humid, creating a condition that leads to formation of rain and storms. Almost all the rain that falls on the land starts in the ocean. The warmer the ocean, the hotter and more humid the surrounding air gets. The more and stronger storms are formed. The spherical shape of the Earth results to the uneven heating of the Earth's surface. This makes the polar region colder and the equatorial hotter. The oceans do not only store solar radiation, it also helps in keeping the global energy balance by distributing heat and moisture around the globe. The Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation or AMOC, the global ocean current known also as the thermohaline circulation or global conveyor belt, transports warm water and precipitation from the equatorial region to the polar regions and bringing back cold water to the tropical regions. This process helps regulate global climate by preventing the equatorial region extremely hot and the polar region extremely cold. Otherwise, there would be less habitable land on Earth. Global warming threatens to slow down the global conveyor belt that may lead to making parts of the southern hemisphere hotter and the north cooler. Slowing down of the global conveyor belt may lead to changes in rainfall patterns that may dry up rivers in Europe and around 20 inches of sea level rise on the eastern seaboard of North America. This scenario was depicted in the movie The Day After Tomorrow in 2004. The cryosphere. The ice, snow, glaciers, sea ice sheet, permafrost, or the permanently frozen layer of the Earth's surface, river and lake ice, including the seasonally frozen ground, are important components of the climate system, for they contribute to global exchange of water, energy, and carbon. Changes in the condition of the cryosphere can bring about changes in the global climate system. Understanding how the climate system operates makes us realize that everything is interconnected and interdependent. A change in any of its components can initiate a chain of reactions from the different other components that disrupt the balance in the climate system. Human activities have altered the Earth's surface and the composition of the atmosphere. The atmospheric concentrations of carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide have increased significantly since the start of the Industrial Revolution. Since pre-industrial times, the atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide has increased by over 40%. Methane has increased by more than 150%, and nitrous oxide has increased by roughly 20%. Increases in all these three gases contribute to warming of Earth, with the increase in carbon dioxide playing the largest role. Carbon dioxide are mainly from burning of fossil fuel and deforestation. Sources of methane is mostly from agriculture and landfills. Methane remains in the atmosphere for a shorter amount of time, but it can trap heats 25 times more than carbon dioxide, so it's more potent. Nitrous oxide remains in the atmosphere for about 120 years, is 298 times more potent than carbon dioxide and methane. Nitrous oxides and the other greenhouse gases, some are synthetic, are mostly from manufacturing industry. Based on the recorded data by NASA that is included in the IPCC report, the atmospheric concentrations of carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide have increased significantly since the start of the Industrial Revolution. In the case of carbon dioxide, The average concentration measured at Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii has risen from 316 parts per million in 1959 to more than 411 parts per million in 2019. The same rates of increase have since been recorded at numerous other stations worldwide. Since pre-industrial times, the atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide has increased by over 40%. Methane has increased by more than 150. And nitrous oxides have increased by roughly 20%. More than half of the increase in carbon dioxide has occurred since 1970. While greenhouse gases emissions are increasing, carbon sink is also diminishing. Massive deforestation and land use change have increased concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Deforestation and land use change account for approximately 11% of global carbon dioxide emissions, contributing to global warming and climate change. Studies on deforestation of tropical rainforest in the Amazon basin, Central Africa, and Southeast Asia, wherein climate models were used to simulate what happens when forests are denuded, suggest that deforestation of tropical forests can affect the climate on the other side of the world in terms of rainfall. The studies show that deforestation, for example, in the Southeast Asia, can bring much rainfall in southern Europe and the Arabian Peninsula, while deforestation in the Amazon can reduce rainfall over the US Midwest and in Northeast China. The studies also find that global temperature could rise by as much as zero point 0.7 degrees if all tropical forests are denuded, which could impact on agricultural productivity and food security. Nature has its own way of regulating the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere to maintain energy balance in the system. But humans have introduced change that have disrupted the balance. Increased amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and diminished carbon sink enhanced the greenhouse effect that results to chain of reactions from the other components of the climate system. Enhanced greenhouse effect has made the oceans warmer. The oceans have absorbed much of the excess heat in the climate system, with the top 700 meters of ocean showing warming of 0.302 degrees Fahrenheit since 1969. Warming of the oceans leads to increased atmospheric temperature and moisture that leads to severe weather events such as super typhoons, intense monsoon rain, and droughts. It causes melting of the snow cover, glaciers, and sea ice that contributes to the sea level rise and coastal flooding. Rising ocean temperature changes the ocean water chemistry that affects marine species and ecosystem. Rising temperature causes coral bleaching, ocean acidification, and the loss of breeding grounds for marine fishes and mammals. With the increasing amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, more carbon dioxide is absorbed by the water, causing ocean acidification. When absorbed, carbon dioxide bonds with seawater, forming carbonic acid. This acid then releases a bicarbonate ion and a hydrogen ion. The free hydrogen ion bonds with free carbonate ions in the water, forming another bicarbonate ion. And because of that, it leaves the marine animals like shellfish, the corals, no carbonate ions to make their calcium carbonate shells and skeletons. This image were taken by the Earth's Observatory of NASA, shows the declining Arctic sea ice from 2000 to 2020. Melting glaciers and ice sheets due to rising global ocean and surface temperature are causing the expansion of warmer oceans and sea level rise. Sea level has risen by about 15 centimeters during the 20th century and currently rising more than twice as fast. Sea level rise increases frequency of extreme events during high tides and intense storms. On February 6, 2020, weather stations recorded the hottest temperature on record for Antarctica that caused widespread melting on nearby glaciers. Melting of snow and ice exposes dark surface areas that absorb more heat, leading to higher temperature. That causes more melting, that leads to higher sea level rise and a chain of more aggravating results. Thawing of permafrost also releases large amount of methane and soil carbon that are trapped in the soil, enhancing further the global warming. About 1/4 of global total soil carbon are from the thawing of permafrost, according to IPCC report. The rate of sea level rise has accelerated due to growing water inputs from ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica. In addition to the contribution of meltwater from glaciers and the expansion of warmer sea waters, this is according to IPCC report in 2019. This new assessment has also revised upwards the projected contribution of the Antarctic's ice sheet to sea level rise by 21st years. Okay. In the case of high emissions of greenhouse gases, she said, the wide range of sea level projections for 2000s and beyond is related to how ice sheets will react to warming, especially in Antarctica, with major uncertainties still remaining. Okay. Global warming has already reached 1 degree centigrade above the pre-industrial level. This is according to the IPCC report in 2019, due to past and current greenhouse gas emissions. There is overwhelming evidence that this is resulting in profound consequences for ecosystems and people, more so for the most vulnerable countries like the Philippines. The Philippines ranked first in the world in terms of vulnerability to tropical cyclones. The Philippines also ranked third in terms of the population's exposure to floods and droughts. We are experiencing that every year, except for droughts. The Philippines has its all. Okay, we have 32,400 kilometers discontinuous coastline that is vulnerable to storm surges. High population density in coral areas. We are experiencing 20 average typhoon every events per year. And half of the strongest typhoons or storms to hit land in the 20th and 21st century ended up striking the Philippines. 20 to 25% of its population are living below poverty level. About 50% of the poor population are in the rural areas and are dependent on natural-based livelihood, subsistence farming for those in the upland areas. We are losing billions of pesos due to typhoons. Billions of pesos for the agricultural rural sector alone. What about the other industries? Okay. Uh, a forecast scenario for the Philippines in relation to climate change, we will have more disasters, strong typhoons to come. Okay, not included in the picture are the typhoons that hit our country last year. Typhoon Rolly and Typhoon Ulysses. With regards to drought, 33 provinces to suffer from drought until end of the 2019. Okay. As of March 2019, the Department of Agriculture reported a 464.3 million production loss. Crops affected are mostly rice and corn. And about 13,679 hectares of agricultural lands have been affected by severe droughts in 2019, translating to the suffering of 16,034 farmers in Region 4B, Mimaropa, okay, and in other parts of the country. Okay, in summary, the driver of climate change is the increased concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere as the result of human activities that are ecologically disruptive. Climate change has adverse impacts on the ecosystem and the society. Everything is connected to everything else in the complex and fragile climate system. Introduced change in any of its components disrupts its delicate balance. We humans are integral part of that system. Ecological stability is a key to stabilizing climate. By understanding the natural processes and mechanisms in the climate system, we can strengthen our ability to mitigate, to adapt, and be resilient. As Albert Einstein said, look deep into nature and then you will understand everything better. Isang makakalikasang araw po sa lahat. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, Dr. Louis. Your presentation explained why Pope Francis declared a climate emergency. And thank you, Dr. Louis. Your presentation explained why Pope Francis declared a climate emergency and had his strongest and most direct intervention on climate change. There is ecological crisis, but there is a solution. This will be the focus of the second presentation. Our second speaker is the founding president of Green Convergence for Safe Food, Healthy Environment, and Sustainable Economy, a coalition of environmental organizations and individuals. She is also involved in another NGO called Consumer Rights for Safe Food, which advocates organic agriculture and natural food-based diet. She is also with the Philippine Network of Educators for the Environment, which she led as president for several years. She's been with Miriam College for, listen to this, 54 years, where she held various administrative positions, which include Vice President for Academic Affairs and Executive Director of Miriam College Environmental Studies Institute. In events such as this, she always wants to tell the participants that she continues to be passionate in her advocacy for the sake of her grandchildren, who she says deserve a world as beautiful as that which God gave us. Friends, Let us welcome Dr. Angelina Galang.
Thank you. Good morning, officials and officers of CAP, administrators, faculty, students of CAP educational institutions in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Isang makakalikasang araw sa ating lahat and happy Catholic Schools Week. I thank you for inviting me to speak on what can be a quantum leap for improving the environment of our beloved country. Climate change is now a buzzword. It has entered the vocabulary of the layperson. That's the good news. It's hanging, I can't. Okay. Some time ago, our kasambahay, while washing clothes, was uttering and muttering the phrase, climate change, ang init. All the while, the electric light was on, even if it was broad daylight, and the water was running and already overflowing in her pail. That's the bad news. Many people know the effects of climate change, higher temperatures, violent storms, droughts, but are not aware of the causes and therefore the solutions, many of which are in their hands. Needless to say, as her employer, it was quite a challenge for me to explain the issue. As I speak to you today, and especially after the excellent talk of Dr. Louis Parungao, I'm pretty sure you have the understanding of the global crisis, a crisis infinitely more serious, made more serious by our COVID pandemic. And what a crisis it is. This photo says it all. The floods that carried mud and water made these homes in Marikina unlivable. And the children's education suffered a monumental setback as their tablets, laptops, and written modules were made unusable. It is a global crisis, and the Philippines is considered one of the most vulnerable countries suffering from the impact of climate change. Climate change has been in the consciousness of scientists since the mid-century. And in 1992, the United Nations convened what is now called the Earth Summit or Rio Summit. It was attended by hundreds of global leaders, all concerned about this growing menace. The summit resulted in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or Climate Change Convention, simply put. It recognized the impact of human activities on the atmosphere. And the objective of the summit was to stimulate greenhouse gas concentrations at a level that would prevent dangerous anthropogenic or human-induced interference with the climate system. There followed what are known as the Conference of Parties, a meeting of representatives of the United Nations countries in various parts of the world, um, roughly every year or more. And there have been 25 meetings in all. And I would just like to cite two of the more familiar, the bigger milestones in these series of conferences. One is the Kyoto Conference, which resulted in the Kyoto Protocol, formulated in 1997 and took effect in 2005. Though it stated that all countries had the responsibility to address climate change, it acknowledged that the industrialized countries had more of the responsibility because they had caused the huge volume of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere because of their earlier development. 37 industrialized countries in the European Community were to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions at an average of 5% compared to 1990 levels over a 5-year period. Then in 2016, the COP, or Conference of Parties, met in Paris and resulted in the Paris Agreement, which probably most of you have heard of, if not all. It sets the limit to global warming well below 2 degrees, preferably 1.5 degrees centigrade, compared to pre-industrial levels. It is a consensus among climate experts that higher than this temperature, our planet will reach the point of no return, with much more calamitous events that will occur. More ferocious typhoons, more disastrous droughts. The treaty also allows each country to set its own target, which are now called the Nationally Determined Contribution, or NDC. But the agreement is more specific in stipulations for advanced countries. They are supposed to have peaked their emissions in 2030, meaning by 2030, the advanced countries should already be going down in the greenhouse gas emissions. That's just 10 years from now. The industrialized countries are also obliged to contribute to a global climate fund to help developing countries meet their own plans to reduce their own emissions while pursuing economic and social development. The agreement also lays down mechanisms for reporting, monitoring, and verifying the NDCs. These reports have to be submitted every 5 years. And yet, in spite of all these innumerable conferences and meetings and agreements, which probably spewed out a lot of carbon dioxide into the air, there has been hardly any let up in the planet's warming atmosphere. Clearly, drastic steps were needed. In 2018, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change announced that through its mathematical model, the goal of 1.5 degrees centigrade, if it is to be reached, the world must be carbon neutral by 2050. This is a quantum leap, a big step. Quantum meaning huge. As Dr. Carlo Garcia graphically put it, if we have taken steps, okay, to improve things, but we have gone from A to B, then B to C, then C to D. But if we want to make a quantum leap, we go from A to M, or perhaps Z as the most ideal. What is carbon neutrality? It means that the greenhouse gases emissions must be balanced by their absorbance by carbon sinks. Throughout history, humans have invented ways by which to make life more convenient and comfortable. And in the last roughly 200 years, we have prodigiously used fuels to this end. And now our emissions far outweigh our carbon sinks. So emissions going higher and higher, our sinks going smaller and smaller. What we need now is to restore the balance. Well, Dr. Barungao had already talked about the carbon sources in brief. We have the greenhouse gases, the most notorious being carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide. Carbon dioxide spewed out mainly by vehicles, electricity production, using fossil fuels, all of these, and manufacturing. Methane being emitted by dump sites, cattle, and nitrous oxide by modern conventional agriculture. Our carbon sinks are our natural ecosystems, mainly forests, coral reefs, and Louis Parungao mentioned the phytoplankton, which are plants. All plants absorb carbon dioxide because of photosynthesis. And mangroves, these are the big ecosystems which can be giant carbon sinks. And yet, because of the degradation of our ecosystems, carbon sinks are only to a 13% of carbon sources. That's how huge the task is. I would like to put a bit of emphasis at this point on soil, which is often overlooked in discussions of climate change. Soil can either be a carbon source or a carbon sink. In conventional agriculture or modern agriculture, soil is tilled or overturned on a massive scale. It releases carbon from the topsoil. So when this carbon is oxidized, it forms carbon dioxide. The use of fertilizers in modern agriculture releases nitrous oxide. Pesticides kill the microorganisms, which form a synergistic network that holds the minerals, including carbon and nitrogen. Organic agriculture nourishes, organic soil nourishes the health, its health, as well as the crops. So chemically tilled and fertilized and managed agriculture is a carbon source, while organic soil is a carbon sink. Organic agriculture keeps these microorganisms healthy and keeps the greenhouse gases locked in the soil where they belong. What about the Philippines? Environmental consciousness started creeping in the 1960s and 70s. And since then, we should be proud that we have produced among the best environmental laws in the world. We have the National Integrated Protected Area System, which have which has identified areas which we should protect because they are important. We have the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, and this is important for the environment. It's because we know that the tribal peoples know best how to take care of the environment. We have the Clean Air Act, the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act, which is really um, has been hailed as one of the best in the world. We have the Clean Water Act, the Renewable Energy Act, the Organic Agriculture Act, and the National Environmental Awareness and Education Act. Although these laws were passed in consideration of our local situation and not in the context of climate change, we can see that they are potentially contributory to the mitigation of climate change. For example, when we do solid waste management, we reduce our waste and consumption. And since consumption means manufacture, we lessen our carbon contribution to the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. When we protect our national parks, that means we keep our forests intact, and so on. I think our teachers in our schools can readily connect these acts to the climate change issue. Last year, in a series of consultations, civil society or NGOs, non-governmental organizations, we searched for what can allow us to accelerate the improvement of our environment. Because we have all these laws, there has been some implementation, we've had some successes, but our environment remained degraded. We needed a quantum leap. And we settled on the vision of Philippine climate neutrality by 2050. Actually, under the Paris Agreement, the developing countries do not have the obligation to go neutral because presumably they need to develop and therefore will need the energy provided by fossil fuels for our development. But actually, if we think about it, we believe we can develop better and faster if we transition to renewable energy sooner rather than later. This transition to renewable energy would mean less importation of fossil fuels, and therefore we save on dollars. Transitioning will mean we take advantage of our God-given blessings of sun, wind, tide, wave, geothermal energy, which we have an abundance of. This will, utilizing these renewable sources of energy, will spur research and the development of our technical and technological skills. And our graduates in these courses will not have to go to migrate to other countries to practice their profession. Carbon neutrality 2050 means that we revive our forests. So this results in less soil erosion, more water supply, less floods, and all the suffering that these bring. Less waste in dump sites means less methane, but it also means better waste management. So we save on our resources. Waste management means we compost more and we can enrich our soil with compost. So really, rather than an expense, we actually benefit economically, socially, and definitely environmentally if we adopt the vision of 2050. Why do we think this call will bring about a quantum change? First, it is a call that can be rallied around by all sectors, including the government. You are probably aware that many times NGOs and even the church can be at odds with the government when we push for environmental improvement. But this call is non-confrontational. It's not we and you or they. It is not accusatory. Of course, doesn't mean that we will not call on whatever sector needs to be called if there are problems to be solved. But everyone should look into their own systems and their own programs in order to determine for themselves how they can contribute to this vision. All agencies, corporations, businesses, institutions can do their share. Second reason why we think this will bring about an accelerated improvement. It is a target that is measurable and we can gauge our success or lack of it in concrete, quantifiable terms. Third, and most importantly, why we should take this leap is that our country faces more hardship if we don't. So this vision calls for a whole of nation approach. Everyone should be involved. And as a country, we should take stock of our emissions, take inventories, and the drawdown ability of our ecosystems in the absorbance of carbon dioxide. Um, as a nation, one of the big calls that has been focused on is our dropping of coal as a fossil fuel. The church has taken has made a loud. The church's voice is loud in this, in the sense that the church is calling for divestment of funds from companies, even banks, who support coal. Actually, if we turn away from coal, we can reduce our carbon emissions by 30% and even up to 60% if we do not at all include it in our future climate fuel mix. But lower than the whole nation as an entity, we can also have these inventories by regions, provinces, cities and municipalities, barangays, institutions and establishments, including academic institutions, households, and even individual levels. It sounds overwhelming, but actually, there are entities which already have shown that they are willing and able. And here are some showcase LGUs in greenhouse gas management. LGUs which have made their greenhouse gas inventories are Makati, Pasig, Quezon City, Santa Rosa, Batangas City, Aurora Province, and Kalayaan, Laguna. And of course, they have gone into management practices like solar-powered streetlights, barangay halls, and specifically some features are the electric jeepneys in Makati, the carless Sundays in Pasig, and the meatless Mondays for Quezon City employees. But you are familiar with all these practices. Academic institutions, and I'm sure CEAP institutions um, have gone into these, reducing carbon sources and increasing their carbon sinks, like installation of solar panels, the reduction and management of waste, recycling, composting, conserving electricity, water, materials, planting of native trees, and the admonition to buy local so that we don't import more and therefore we lessen our carbon footprint. For those who are into agriculture, Catholic schools into agriculture, I hope that you are practicing regenerative organic agriculture. And some of our institutions have outreach programs in agricultural areas. And I hope they likewise promote organic agriculture. But beyond these, which we have already been doing, the important thing is to measure our emissions, how much, and therefore how much we need to reduce by measuring by having these yardsticks. And of course, all the time we boost our environmental education programs so that we are developing global citizens among our students. I would like to cite now one school which has been into carbon neutrality programs since 2011. The De La Salle University system has been into measuring its footprint and promoting its carbon sinks since then, as I said, 2011. And here is a sample of how they have measured their carbon footprint. This is, I believe, in the La Salle campus in Dasmariñas. So they measured their electricity consumption or energy consumption, which includes electricity, the number of cars and motorcycles, and the average distance traveled by these two ways, to and from school. And they computed by using the respective factor, it's quite technical. And so they came up with a number of 1,511 plus metric tons that they released in 2018 and 1,791 metric tons which they spewed out in 2019. They also computed the carbon drawdown by trees, equivalent to vehicular carbon emissions. So they measured the vehicular emissions of their central house administration, and they came up with the fact that their 4,931 plus kilograms of carbon dioxide emitted can be offset by 1,136 mature trees. So by comparing their carbon footprint with their tree planting activities, they can chart their journey towards carbon neutrality. A very interesting and probably expected effect of online classes during the pandemic is the decrease in carbon emitted per student to around 71%. Definitely, mainly this decrease is from travel, electricity usage, because you don't have to use electricity in the halls, in the bathrooms, although you use these at home. Common areas, which are large areas in schools, do not have to turn on their lights. And of course, waste, and definitely travel. DLSU or De La Salle also had the program of planting 1 million trees in 10 years. I am told that they have exceeded this and they have planted 1.4 million trees as an institution. DLSU's program is impressive. I hope the technical nature does not overwhelm you, but this is a work in progress for us and for La Salle. The formulas, the determinations will still have to be worked on and modified and refined. This needs research and study, which is definitely the turf of the academia. CEAP has great potential to contribute significantly. It can rally its members to respond to this call of carbon neutrality 2050. With its technical experts among the faculty, it can greatly help in making this quantum leap for our country. I hope we all cooperate because as we work to save the world, we will be saving ourselves. We are making this call also because as Catholic institutions, we must internalize Pope Francis's admonition to hear the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. He stressed this admonition in adding the eighth to the seven spiritual corporal works of mercy. While we help the hungry, the thirsty, the naked, the homeless, the sick, the imprisoned, and the dead, we must definitely care for our common home. And we must teach our students to likewise do the same, because it is they who will inherit the earth's stewardship. Thank you very much for your attention. Good morning.
you, Dr. Galang. Thank you for convincing us. Of course, we were convinced that there is a solution to this ecological crisis. So we are now on our Q&A portion. But before we proceed, I just would like to inform Dr. Galang and Dr. Parungao, just in case you did not notice, that I saw thousands of hearts flying on the comment section of the CAP Facebook page. And I assume that it's an expression that they love what you were saying and that, of course, they love Catholic education. I would like first to recognize the presence of the different schools from the Visayas, Mindanao, and of course, Luzon. Some schools even, I think, encourage, not required, their students to attend this webinar. Later on, I'm going to read the names of those schools. But for the meantime, let's proceed to the questions that I have here right now. Okay, so I'll start. I think this is for Dr. Louie, but of course, Dr. Galang can also share her thoughts. Dr. Louie, how can science teachers or environmental teachers like us teach climate change and or climate neutrality without intimidating or turning off our students? I think this is a follow-up. And how can non-science teachers, like for example, CLE or theology teachers, teach climate change and climate neutrality? Any tips?
Okay. All right. I used to be a science teacher, though. Actually, in my presentation, I already have used the 7 environmental principles as framework. No? In science, like for example, if your topic is on uh, law of matter, for example, or scientific principles, like for example, the water gets warmer, slower than than land. Uh, these are simple lessons, but we can inject already the concept of climate change. So because of the water getting warmer, something like that. So what I'm trying to say is we have to look for entry points in our curriculum wherein we can integrate the concept of climate change. Um, we just have to the first thing that we should do is to really understand fully what climate system is, and from there it would be easier for us to look for the entry point to integrate climate change in our curriculum. I hope I was able to answer the question. So getting a deeper understanding how climate system operates. From there, you have to start from there. It's very important because if you do not know how the climate system operates, then you wouldn't really know where to integrate the concept of climate change in our curriculum.
Thank you,
That's right.
Dr. Louie.
Yeah.
Dr. Galang,
Yeah,
yes?
that's right. As Lou emphasized, the more you understand something, the simpler you can explain it. And well, with the audiovisual aids nowadays, it's so much easier now than in our time. So take advantage of what are the visuals that are there in the internet. As far as the question about the other non-science subjects integrating it, there are already many articles linking the effects of climate and environmental uh, problems to economics, for example. Di ba? When we have a typhoon, the newspapers always equate the losses, the typhoon to losses in economics, in infrastructure, in agriculture, and even deaths. So just be on the lookout for those connections, and so their understanding and appreciation of the issue will be more alive.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Dina. Before we proceed, I still have a couple of interesting questions here. May I just remind you again that you will receive the certificate of attendance only upon completion of the evaluation form. The link is already posted in the comment section of our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Again, please note that the link will be live only from 11:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. today. Let me repeat, from 11:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. only. And we encourage you to answer the evaluation form, and you will receive your certificate of attendance within the next 3 to 5 days. Please note also that the PowerPoint slides of this webinar and the coming webinars will be made available at the CAP website, that is www.cap.org.ph, and ready for downloading. Now, let's proceed to the next question from Belindo Aguilar. Bye, kumusta? I know this guy. Uh, while to vote in for climate neutrality is a must, is it not also urgent to call for climate justice?
Uh, may I?
Yes,
Oh,
please.
definitely, definitely, and that is the framework of the agreements, of the three agreements the two agreements that I mentioned, Kyoto and the Paris Agreement, and that is why the industrialized nations have to contribute to a fund to help us, and that is why we in Green Convergence are um, taking an active role in helping the Climate Change Commission formulate its nationally determined contribution. Because if we show them that we are ambitious in curbing our emissions and trying to achieve carbon neutrality, we will be a more serious candidate for the funding. And if we have funding, we can therefore attend to our environmental, which will help our social and economic situation. So climate justice is definitely important, but we also have to be just to ourselves and contribute to the extent that we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nina. Dr. Louis?
Yes, definitely. Whenever we talk about climate change, climate justice comes hand in hand with it, no? Kasi we cannot attain yung uh, climate neutrality if there is no climate justice.
Okay. Thank you. Here's another question from Albin Ignao. What do you think po? Are we little too late, or is the time still enough for us to fix everything what we have done on our environmental or on our environment? Thank you po.
Louis, you want to start?
Okay. uh, yeah, kasi the effect is long term. Scientists are saying that even if we stop emitting greenhouse gases, no, we can still feel the effect of climate change in the future. But it doesn't mean that we have to we should that we have to stop, no. The more we have to act fast, the more we have to rush in attaining the carbon neutrality.
Thank you,
Exactly.
Dr. Louis.
Exactly. Yeah, some say we're even past the point of no return already, but that is why the IPCC said we should be carbon neutral by 2050 as a planet. And that's why it's so urgent. Thank you.
Thank you. Here's another question from Del Belmores, but let me read her comment first. Good morning, peace and all. Good. Thank you for the informative talk, Dr. Parungao and Dr. Galang. Though I'm not a science teacher, still I can use this knowledge to integrate the topic to my subject. That's good. Now, here's the question. Is there any project or programs that we can join as we heal our land together? How can we join, if any? By the way, Ms. Del Belmores is from the Franciscan College of the Immaculate Conception, Bye Bye Leyte, Inc. She's asking about projects
The
or
carbon,
initiatives that they can join in.
Well, of course, in this pandemic, there are limited. We have limited movement, but I guess you have to look in your area in Baybay as to what what is going on. I know that the Visayas State University in Baybay Leyte is quite strong on environment, and they have an adopted community in Mount Panasugan, and they have projects in the in the marine ecosystems. They have a good uh, ecological center there. Rain harvesting, they're very big on rain harvesting. Maybe you can contact them uh, for projects that you may join. But if you have some land, you can also start your own programs. And if you have an outreach community, you can also start them on ecological solid waste management, organic agriculture, and so on. Thank you.
Dr. Louis, would you like to add?
Uh, yeah, I agree with Dr. Galang. You can start in your own backyard. No, yung the simple way of planting your or growing your own vegetables in your backyard will do much, no, for the climate. No. And then maybe you can start an environmental project in your school. um, you may start with school gardening and then go out if ever there is this available open land that you can reforest, then maybe you can explore, no. You can also contact people from DNR. Maybe they can help you start your environmental project or a reforestation project in your area.
May I add, Carlo?
Sure, sure.
Um, there is a program led by Ime Sarmiento of Green Convergence, and she has established gardens of native trees all over the country, and she's partnering with schools also. Schools, especially in the rural areas, have land, and so you can have a garden of native trees where the students can learn from the different species you plant. We know that planting our native trees is much better than planting exotic species or foreign species, because native trees attract and promote the growth of native flora and fauna and and the biodiversity that results, and which is good all around. So you can contact us, and we can connect you with Miss Sarmiento. Thank you.
Okay, I think I am allowed to share my thoughts too. I just would like to mention that, in our school, uh, we thought of conducting a webinar that will link climate change and people at home. And so we thought of connecting climate change with plant-based diet. And so people were able to, understand, of course, the importance of having plant-based diet, but at the same time, understand the context the context of climate change. And you know what happened after the webinar? Our own president initiated a project called Plant-Based Diet Cookbook. She said, why don't we promote plant-based diet? Why don't we promote not just in our school, but to all our alumni, the importance of plant-based diet, and then connect that to the whole issues related to climate change. So I think that's one way of making climate change, which is too big, no, closer to the hearts of the people, the ordinary people. Sorry. Okay, here's another question from Bien Lagmay. What would be the role and responsibilities of pollution control officer on this drive? I understand that all schools are required to have a pollution control officer. So who would like to answer this question?
Ah, okay. The role of pollution control officer. Okay, the position, the name of the position itself, no, suggests that uh, you should be responsible for uh, preventing, no, preventing pollution or polluting practices, no, in your institution, no. So maybe you can start campaign regarding the banning the use of single-use plastics, curtail yung reducing, no, reducing the use of resources like paper, and then uh, anything paper make also make sure that your institution is observing strictly the ecological solid waste problem. I think those are just some of the responsibilities that in your hand, no, as pollution control officer. And then maybe, no, in addition to that, maybe you can be the one to initiate, no, yung promoting school gardening, no, greening your campus, so that you will be helping in mitigating the effect of climate change.
Yeah, usually pollution is connected with what is around us, no? Clean air, clean water, no trash. It came before the climate change consciousness. So it's more a human, direct human inconvenience, the dirt around us. But we know that when we reduce pollution, for example, the emission of soot and smoke belching, this means also that we are reducing our use of fuels, and therefore we are reducing our effect on climate change or global warming. So pollution is more direct human inconvenience, but if you really think about it, any reduction in pollution will also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So they're all connected. As Louis pointed out, one of the environmental principles is that everything is connected to everything else. And as depending on our position, our subject that we're handling, the administrative function we have, you look for that connection to climate change, and you'll find it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Here's another question from JP Abalye. Is the Philippines a great contributor of carbon emissions to the world?
No, it's very small. It's insignificant, in fact. And some say, "Oh, why will we bother? We're not contributing." But as I pointed out, every carbon atom counts, and we are vulnerable. But also, as I want to stress, if we go down in our emissions, we do it by systems which will also benefit us socially and economically. If we go to renewable energy, we will be using our sun, which we have plenty of, wind, which we have plenty of, geothermal, and then tide and wave energy are being researched on. So we don't have to import fossil fuels. If we protect our trees, our forests, we are also protecting our water supply, our biodiversity, which we can use for greater economic development. So this call is just a vision, but which has widespread consequences, positive consequences. Thank you.
Well, one of the biggest polluters in the world is back in the Paris Agreement. That's the
Yes, good news.
that's good
Yeah.
news indeed. From Monica Navarro, I know that this issue on climate change needs urgent action, but I surmise that for most young people, this topic is less interesting. What could be done in order that this concern could magnetize with great impact the involvement of our young generation? I think this is somehow similar to the first question on how we can effectively teach climate change and carbon or climate neutrality. Okay, so that's the question. How can we magnetize the young people to be involved and uh, to engage?
Yeah.
Louis.
Okay. I guess the first thing that we should do is make them understand how they will be affected by climate change. And then from there, you can be creative, no, in giving them uh, activities, maybe projects, and then from there, I know that whenever our students, no, the youth understands, no, or realize the impact of something to them, they will act. They will act on it, and they are very good, no, they are very good in um, doing things, no. We can see in the news being featured in the on televisions, youth who are initiating projects, no, and the different projects. So all we need to do is make them understand, make them realize and appreciate climate change. They will initiate actions if they understand, if they how they will be affected.
Show them Greta Thunberg,
Oh yes, that's
Yes.
right. Right, that's
and
right.
they will be excited. And I think she has excited a lot of youth.
That's right.
Yeah, and well, we have many young celebrities now who are into it, and well, we are human, so the kids will be excited by them. So if the celebrities are sincere and they're doing the right thing, let's help. Let's use them, or that's not a good word, but let's take advantage and to excite the youth likewise. But more important, of course, it's good that they will be excited about projects, but their way of life, environment should be a way of life. And in schools, they spend most of their day. And so when they are used to turning off the electric fans and the lights when they go out of the classroom, they will do that wherever they are, in their homes, in their offices in the future. When they're used to segregating waste because the school obliges them to by providing the bins, then they will look for that. They will do that in their later life. I know that some of our students have told me, Miss, but when I am in SM, I look for the separate bins because they are used to segregating their waste in school. So it's really more that their lives, their lifestyle, and their habits and their activities are environmental, and then the projects will come if this is their paradigm. Thank you.
Okay, here's from Cynthia Katungal from Maykawayan, Bulacan. She said, our place was named, I suppose, from the bamboo tree kawayan, May Kawayan. Unfortunately, I don't see here bamboo trees anymore. So, wala nang kawayan. uh, her question is this. Do we still have source of bamboo tree?
Source?
Yes, source. Probably she's asking, where can we find bamboos?
Oh, there's a lot. There is a movement to promote bamboo.
Yeah. Yes.
The finding is that it can be as strong as steel, so it can even be a construction material. It's very flexible from using it for small boxes, decorative boxes, or for furniture, for paper, um, and there are groups promoting it. So we can also connect you to these groups if you're interested. And of course, it's good for erosion control, no?
Yeah.
So thank you.
Oh,
Louis?
here's a message from Father Ben Beltran, SVD.
Ayan, he's a promoter of
Ah, yeah.
bamboo.
Bamboo, yes.
Yeah, according to him, um, he is open to partnering with Catholic schools, dioceses, and LGUs in planting bamboos in the nuded mountains, eroding riverbanks, etc. And you may contact Father Ben Beltran, SBD, through his Facebook page. So let me repeat. Please contact Father Ben Beltran, SVD, through his Facebook page. Thank you, Father. Okay, next question from Florely Jose. Good day. One good program in our municipality is the 1 billion tree planting and growing project, which started in 2017, and we've got already good results. Eroded parts of our place is being planted with bamboo. We dream of a greener place in our municipality. All individuals, organizations are working hand in hand in this endeavor. We are also active in implementing proper waste segregation and disposal. Programs like environmental solid waste management best implementer is an encouragement to us in school through the local government unit of Bagao, Cagayan. Kudos CAP for this endeavor. Sorry, it's not a question. It's a very, very good affirmation. Thank you for sharing, Miss Florelia Jose. Okay, here's another question from Judy Reyes. Does carbon footprint reduce global warming? How?
Go ahead, Louis.
Okay. Uh, Carbon footprint is the measure of how much carbon you are emitting, or how much resources you are using, as against the okay, and included the waste, no, the waste generation that you are the waste that you are generating, as against the rate that nature can replenish these resources. By reducing, so it's a measurement, no, the carbon footprint is a measurement. Okay, by reducing our carbon footprints, then definitely we are helping prevent the climate change.
Nothing more to add.
Okay. Here's a related question. Earlier, Dr. Galang, you presented the De La Salle Philippines initiative with regard to making all De La Salle schools a carbon neutral campus or campuses. Now, here's the question. For schools that want to measure their carbon footprint but do not know how, whom they can ask help?
I think we might have De La Salle faculty here. Maybe they can answer. Definitely, they're the leaders in this, no? Um, but much has to be done technically, how to measure, etc. Of course, there are gross measurements, but I would suggest that CAP hold a webinar with LaSalle as the speaker, So they can give you more details on this. I think Mark Tinao might be here.
Mhm. Or probably they can contact De La Salle
Yeah,
Philippines through their Facebook account.
yeah. They have an institute, LaSalle Institute for the Environment, Life.
Live.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's a comment from Fortune Tolentino Gonzalez. Discipline is really important, which start in our own home. Waste segregation, proper disposal of it, reduce the use of aircon will help. Planting more trees, and the government will implement the law strictly about illegal logging or and kaingin. Okay, here's another question from Arbs Gastardo. Since carbon offsetting and reduction scheme for international aviation is now being implemented almost globally, are we also going to establish a similar program for our schools?
What's that? International what?
Okay, carbon offsetting and reduction scheme for international aviation.
Aviation.
Yes,
Travel by air.
Yes.
I think so. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Are we also going to establish a similar, well, just a similar program for our school? I think the question is more on carbon offsetting and reduction.
Yeah. Well, I think that was the purpose of the LaSalle's program, that they hope to offset their emissions by their tree planting program. Um, I don't know what is at the end of the road. I mean, is it possible for a school to really offset all its emissions? No, because um, we will continue to emit, but as long as what we emit has a corresponding absorption, then that will result in carbon neutrality. Um, so that is why the program entails measuring our carbon footprint and the means by which our emissions is absorbed. As I said, this is a work in progress, and I would like to inform the body here that we in Green Convergence have organized a think tank to um, focus on this program. And one of our committees is a technical committee, which looks into these calculations, computations, etc. Because you can also talk about avoidance, no? When you use solar panels, you're avoiding the emission. You're lessening your carbon footprint, and that can also add to your offsetting. And anyway, going back to the think tank, I would like to enjoin those in CAP schools who would like to join us, and especially the technical committee who will look into this aspect, the technical, mathematical, scientific aspect of carbon neutrality. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Galang. I think we still have another question here, and I believe this is going to be the last. From Carlo Dan Pulido Salques, sorry. How does carbon neutral help promote the goals of sustainable development in our country?
I, I think I gave my piece there already, but Louis might want to add.
Okay, Dr. Louis.
Okay. Car- Kasi when you do carbon when you promote carbon neutrality, that would entail um, curtailing of consumerism, which I believe is the driver of all of this, no? Because of over consumerism, that you have we have to extract more material, more resources. We have to generate a lot of wastes, no? And so if you go carbon neutral, if you aim for a carbon neutrality, all of this will be reduced. And that will lead to sustainable development.
Okay. Uh, it seems there are no more questions. And earlier, by the way, I said that I'm going to read the names of the schools that are present here, but I think I cannot do that anymore. So sorry for that. It's a long list of schools present here from, as I've said, Mindanao all the way to the northern part of Luzon. Continue attending CAP webinars, please. Okay, at this point, I would like to ask Dr. Louis and Dr. Nina to have their concluding remarks, just in case you have final message.
Go ahead, Louis.
Okay. All right. One, as teachers, as educators, we really need to really understand. We should understand fully how the climate system works, and from there, we would be able to integrate this in our curriculum. We would be able to educate our students, and not only our students but also the public. As Dr. Galang said, no, if we know, no, what it is, if we know more about it, then we can simplify, we can it, and so that it can be easily understood by our audience, no, or by our students. Okay. Another thing is climate change is really here, and it's already affecting us, no, we already are experiencing and are being affected by its impact. And looking at the causes of climate change, the real culprit is the uh, losing our balance, our ecological balance. So therefore, we have to uh, aim for restoring this ecological balance so that we would be able to stabilize or help stabilize the climate.
Thank you, Dr. Louis. Dr. Nina.
Okay. This idea of carbon neutrality was started by green convergence in our quest for what we can do as a quantum leap to improve our environment. Through a series of discussions among civil society, that means other NGOs, but also with some representatives of business and church, this was embraced, this was accepted. And so our work now is to strengthen it in the different sectors. The business sector, for example, has the Management Association of the Philippines, and they have a sustainable and climate change committee, which would be receptive to this, and we will be working with them. The church, as I mentioned, we know we have church leaders who are into this thing, and they are important partners. But as I said, CAP as an institution has the great potential to forward this. CAP has the spiritual mandate. And I know that the schools and CAP as an association has the sincerity, the love of country, uh, no agenda but the improvement of our country and the lives of its citizens. So I look forward to CAP being a leader and partner in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Louis. Thank you, Dr. Nina. We will keep in our hearts your message, and we will commit to take action for the sake of our common home. Let me close this session by quoting Pope Francis in Laudato Si. He says, "Climate change is real and mainly a result of human activity. Never have we so hurt and mistreated our common home as we have in the last 200 years." The problem is urgent. We must all change our day-to-day actions to live more sustainably. Reducing greenhouse gases requires honesty, courage, and responsibility. On a larger scale, our leaders must be held accountable. Those who will have to suffer the consequences will not forget this failure of conscience and responsibility. Solving climate change means protecting the planet and vulnerable people. We must hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. Faith can guide us. The entire material universe speaks of God's love, His boundless affection for us. The problems are big and urgent, but hope remains if we act in honesty and love. Humanity still has the ability to work together in building our common home. Truly, much can be done. Before we end, we would like to thank the Private Education Assistance Committee, or PEAC, and our web host, the Raxo City, for being our wonderful partners for this webinar. Join us again tomorrow at 9 a.m. for our webinar entitled Nonviolence for the Next Generation. That's tomorrow, 9 a.m. On behalf of our President, Sister Marisa Viri, RBM, the CEAP Board of Trustees, our Programs Committee Chair, Father Iking Balongag, the GIPG Champions, our CEAP Executive Director, Mr. Jose Alan Arellano, and the CEAP National Secretariat, this is Carlo Garcia saying thank you and, is it afternoon now? No, still morning. Thank you and good morning, everyone.
Thank you.
Serbisyong totoo, kahalintulad ni Kristo.